Covering the veteran artists from pop, rock, soul, country, folk, and blues that influence today's music world, this is the VVN Music Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by the new VVN Music Radio. VVN plays the songs of the veteran artists from 1955 to today, 24 hours per day, 7 days a week. Hi, and welcome to episode 10 of the VVN Music Podcast. I'm Roger Wink, and today we welcome veteran guitarist Steve Hackett. But first, I hope you've had a chance to check out VVN Music Radio. The new service exclusively plays the veteran artists who have been recording for 20 years or more across a wide variety of genres. But, unlike other oldie stations, we don't cut things off at a certain date. If an artist recorded his first record in 1957 and put out a new hit in the last couple of years, we'll play them both and all of their music in between. There's no editing, only playing certain hits from the artist's catalog, and there's no small 300-track playlist. We're now programming over 4,000 different records from thousands of artists, with more to come in the near future. Plus, we guarantee that, while we play the biggest hits, every third song is a deeper cut that didn't make the top 10 on the national charts. Plus, we have special programming. Every night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, it's an hour of 60s music, followed at 7 by the decade of the 70s, and at 8, it's an all-80s hour. You can listen to the new VVN Music at vvnmusic.com by just clicking on the link in the right column. Or you can hear it on the TuneIn or Radionomy apps, both available in the Apple and Google stores. That's VVN Music Radio. Our guest today is Steve Hackett. Hackett started playing the guitar at the age of 12 and was influenced by both classical and blues music and artists. After working with a couple of local bands, he recorded for the first time in 1970 in the band Quiet World. But it was an ad he placed in Melody Maker magazine seeking musicians interested in going beyond the norm that got the attention of singer Peter Gabriel, who was looking for a new guitarist for his group Genesis. Hackett played with the band for 7 years, during which they turned out some of their most complex music, including the albums Nursery Crime, Selling England by the Pound, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and Trick of the Tail. Steve had already recorded a solo album prior to leaving Genesis and continued to pursue a solo career with albums that ran from progressive rock to classical. But in 1986, he took a detour to form the group GTR with Steve Howe. The band's one self-titled album was produced by Jeff Downs and included possibly the biggest hit of Hackett's career, When the Heart Rules the Mind. Unfortunately, the band broke up after that one release, and Hackett returned to solo work, along with collaborating with a long list of artists. He has also revisited the music of Genesis a number of times on recent albums. This year, Hackett has seen a number of releases revolving around his career in music, including a new solo album, Wolflight, an expanded release of the GTR album, a collection of early solo recordings called Premonitions, The Early Works 1975 to 1983, and the documentary The Man, the Music. You have had a really busy year. From just what I've seen, you've had your original album, Wolflight, you had a documentary come out on your life, and then you have the new GTR release, and another one with your early albums. It sounds like you've had quite the year.
Yeah, it's been extraordinary. So many things from the past have been either reissued or they're current things. And there's also the tribute album with Adele as well, which has been re-released with an extra track that's got the classical stuff on it, in the Bach pieces and all of that. So yeah, right across the board, it's been an extraordinary year for me. A lot of touring and that's not over yet. So I seem to be in the middle of a very good run, riding a very good wave at the moment.
You left Genesis in 1977 and then recorded a number of solo albums, evolving to kind of an acoustic sound in the early 80s, including a couple of classical albums. What made you decide to move back into a full band with GTR? My Genesis afterlife comprised initially
rock albums. I did Please Don't Touch with Richie Havens and Steve Walsh of Kansas, to mention but two, and then I did Spectrum Warnings and Defector. They were all rock albums. I think I did Cured and then Highly Strung, all rock albums, and then we did Bay of Kings with John Aycock, the late great John Aycock. I'd started recording that acoustic stuff from 1980 onwards, whereas previously there might be one acoustic track per rock album. There'd be a nylon guitar track on each rock album. In the main, that's how I was working. But then occasionally I'd go and do an album like Bay of Kings or Momentum, where it would be solely nylon guitar, 99% nylon guitar, and then the tribute album, the recent one, which was reissued with an extra track. So I have done that, and I've worked with my brother on an album of Eric Satie material called Sketches of Satie. So there have been quite a few of those little sort of acoustic things, the occasional live album in that style. But these days I'm back to rock. I've sometimes done things with orchestras. Sometimes those have been acoustic things. But Wolflight, the latest one, of course, combines aspects of all of those things. A lot of orchestral influence on it, as well as the rockier stuff and the influence of world music, and to try and fuse as many disparate influences as possible, and take that pan-genre approach forward, because I think audiences are ready for that. I don't think you need to take it back to the roots exclusively. I mean, by all means, do it for a track or two if that's what you want to do. But I like music that's integrated and collisions of different cultures.
Is that how you try and do your live shows? Now, I noticed that this is the Wolflight tour, but you also promise a lot of Genesis material also because of your work on the revisited albums. Do you try and take the mix in the live shows?
Well, what I've been doing has been dividing up the show into two halves, practically 3 hours, where we have an intermission in the middle, having done celebrating the very early stuff from Voyage as it's its 40th anniversary, and then we do stuff from Wolflight to celebrate that, as it's done very well in the charts internationally, and I do stuff from Spectrum Warnings, and then we tend to stop and have a 15 or 20 minute break, and then I come back with Genesis stuff and celebrate the early years of Genesis from 71 to 75, the era that Peter Gabriel was involved with the band, where all 5 of us were writing for the band and doing some songs that have not been performed live for a very long time, or not performed at all, in fact. A couple of things from Foxtrot, Get 'Em Out by Friday, and Can Utility and the Coastliners, and then from Selling England by the Pound, we're doing Cinema Show and After the Ordeal, and Firth of Fifth. So Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. It's been an interesting time. We do it in surround sound live, so you get Genesis surrounded as part of the package. But it's an attempt to take people through the total experience as it's been advertised on this side of the pond. From Acolyte to Wolflight, and also the Genesis Revisited, which I was spending the past 2 or 3 years doing exclusively Genesis work live. I do enjoy doing the early Genesis work, and still flying the flag for that, because I think it was and not just stuff that I held in great affection and I was proud of, but also audiences have loved that. Genesis was a very slow burn. It didn't always have the success early on, but in time, those early albums outstripped the later albums in terms of sales. So it's shown itself to be hugely commercially viable all over again as these things get re-released and surround mixes and formats change. But it never seems to go away. That's the thing. It still works in the way that it did all those years ago with audiences.
You keep pretty close to the original arrangements on those songs when you perform them live. Now, recently I talked with John Anderson, who just put out an album with Jean-Luc Ponty, where they take some of the Yes material and really kind of give them a twist on the arrangements. Have you ever thought of doing anything like that?
Well, I had, because I did two Genesis Revisited albums. I did one in the 1990s and then another one more recently. And the one I did in the 90s took much more liberties with the arrangements and changed things around. The new one, I decided to do authentic versions, but to change certain things, extend solos, change things, use brass, use orchestra, to do enlargements of what was the original stuff. So I quite understand John's approach with that, and he and I have spoken from time to time, and it's very interesting, that pairing. But we do that kind of thing as a matter of course, where Rob Townsend doesn't attempt to play exactly the same oboe or flute phrases that Peter Gabriel did. Rob is a virtuoso brass and woodwind man, so all of that means we can take this stuff onto another level, as I say, and do it with surround and do the thing with it that I would have loved to have had in the early days when we did these original recordings. But it was a very long time ago, very young band, full of lots of great ideas, not always with the technique or the technical capacity to be able to, fully flesh out those ideas.
As you mentioned, you have done two Genesis Revisited albums. Any chance that there'll be a third one coming along?
Well, I haven't got any plans to do that. I think that if you put together all the live DVDs that I've done, and we've just filmed in Liverpool, all the tracks that I did not stick on these previous revisited things, they start to crop up, and so I do have live versions of these things, which may well surface at some point. So it is possible to do it. But I'm doing Cinema Show, and I'm doing Get 'Em Out by Friday, not done for a very long time, and Can Utility was never really done live. I think we played it about twice in Italy in 1972 and gave up. We couldn't manage to make it work when it was Genesis back in the day. But I've got on stage, these guys are virtuoso players who eat this stuff up for breakfast. So it's a different ball game now.
Mentioning the people you have playing with you, is this a band that you've had together for quite some time?
Yeah, the core of it is, but with two additions. There are two Swedish guys in the band. When we do the Genesis stuff, Nad Sylvan sings the Genesis songs, and Royna Stoltz from the Flower Kings and Transatlantic, who is very well known as an extraordinary lead guitarist. He's playing bass with me and 12-string and some lead guitar. So, we swap around these things, and he's got a very interesting way of using his bass at times, gets the most extraordinary sounds out of it. So he's a Rickenbacker man with that. And when he offered to join the band and do this, I was thrilled. I thought, well, here's another personality in the band. This is very, very nice. He's a great player, very modest guy, very, very quiet, but extraordinarily accomplished. So it does make for an extraordinary band.
I know you probably get this question all the time, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. With Phil Collins coming back into music after being semi-retired, is there any interest at all in a reunion with the original band?
Well, I've always said that if they were interested, please call me. I think it must be obvious to all of the Genesis guys that the fact that I've gone out and done exclusively Genesis work live for the past 2 or 3 years and taken that around the world and shown that it was possible to revalidate the whole ethos of early Genesis. You could say the invitation is there, or the challenge to see what we could do together. Obviously, there would need to be quite a lot of bridges crossed before we got to that point. Phil says he wants to return to full-time playing and do that. I wish him an absolute return to health, and I would be overjoyed to find that not only had he managed to do that, but that at some point we might all get to play together again, whether that's at Madison Square Garden or whether it's an English pub called the Bull and Bush. As far as I'm concerned, it would be great. Fans would love it. Meanwhile, of course, it's a very long wait. It's been a long time since I've worked with those guys live. Since 1982 was the last time we were all on stage together. Let's put it this way. That would be great, but meanwhile, there's the Genesis afterlife, and I try and honor the early work that we did. And I still, love and adore all the guys and all the work that they've done, whether it was when we were together or the stuff they've done individually. It's been an extraordinary band, of course.
Are you in contact at all with any of them on a regular basis?
Well, there was a documentary recently that we all took part in, and so yes, a while back we had all met up for various things, interviews and a premiere of that, and it's been shown all over the world. So we have been in contact, and I'm also friends with my predecessor in Genesis, Anthony Phillips, who is an extraordinary character and very gifted in his own right. So we've had that pairing. He played on an album of mine a while back. He played on Out of the Tunnel's Mouth, and again, very gifted, very lovely guy. So there's always that contact, and there's always the possibility that there'll be something with Genesis. But so far, there's been resistance in the ranks, and it'd be nice if it happened, but what can I say? It takes everyone to tango.
I think Peter is working on a new album too, which I'm sure is going to make it hard to get something together.
Well, I think most of the guys are working on something new all the time, and it's part and parcel of what we do. That commitment to music that's there with all of the individuals from that band. So whatever happens in the future will be interesting.
I'd like to go back to GTR for a couple minutes. How did that band come together?
Well, at the time, I was living in an area in London called Holland Park, and the guy who'd been Yes's manager, who became H's manager, was a character called Brian Lane, and he was a very high-powered British manager. And at the time, as I say, he was a neighbor, so we used to bump into each other. And we stayed in contact with each other, and I congratulated him on his success with Asia. And he said to me, well, Steve Howe's just left the band now, so I don't know what the future is for that band. And we started to kick around various ideas, and we thought perhaps a project with the two of us might be interesting. The idea of a project turned very quickly into an idea of a band, and I think there were a number of people who didn't think we could pull that off. But I think we proved that guitarists could make an accessible and an album that was bankable as well. So we were, I think we were both very proud of that album. It was very hard fought for, believe me. It wasn't all roses, but I think that Clive Davis did a terrific job promoting that album. MTV did a wonderful job taking us under its wing at the time, and I have to say American FM played their part with that. So it was a terrific job, and it was a big smash success in America, and I've got the gold album to prove it. And maybe it'll go platinum now, who knows?
You had a top 10 hit out of that, which here in the United States, which was something that the early days of Genesis, even though their reputation and of those albums has grown in the sales over the years, it's something that they didn't accomplish like the later Genesis did. So that was really turned out to be one of your biggest hits.
Well, it was one of my biggest hits, and its rise was meteoric at the time. As I say, it looked like we were going to sign to Geffen, and then Geffen decided to pass on the project. They didn't consider that it was commercial enough. I think what they wanted was everyone in the band to be well known, and so they wanted an Asia Mark II, and I was personally worried that I might get caught in the crossfire of a Yes reunion and get left out in the cold. And I thought that, in a way, we had some new characters in there. We had a stunning young drummer in Jonathan Mover, who then went on to work with Alice Cooper, Joe Satriani, Aretha Franklin, to mention but a few, and Phil Spaulding on bass, Max Bacon, who had a great voice. I knew him from a band called Nightwing. I'd been called in to produce a track or two of Nightwing at the time, and he was breaking up with that band, but I thought he was a tremendous talent and might be right for this GTR idea, and so I suggested him for the role there, and Jonathan was keen to work with me prior to GTR, and I said, well, yes, it would be nice to do solo work with you, but I might have something that you might find interesting, and I'll have a word with somebody. And I was a little bit secretive about it, but I mentioned it to Steve Howe. Steve Howe came down, checked out the guy, said, wow, the chops are something enormous. And even Bill Bruford came down at one point and said, with chops like that, you can go anywhere. So everyone's very impressed with Jonathan. We hooked up again recently, Jonathan and I. It was very nice to see him after all these years and find out exactly what he'd been up to. So he'd been a busy boy, as had Steve Howe, of course, and myself, and I think most of those guys all stayed in music. I don't know if Max did, but again, I'm quite sure that the interest in GTR all over again, it seems to be producing a result that's surprising. It's very funny the way a success works, isn't it? You think, here's something that was a success in the mid '80s. Now, why would that be a success all over again now? And it's the fact that it's been re-released. It's got the live album in there as well. It's got the King Biscuit Flower Hour thing in there. People have been talking about doing a surround sound mix with it. That's not on the cards right at this moment, but I will try and talk Mark Powell into that, and let's see if we can do all of that. And I think it still has legs. Maybe it'll have wings. We don't know yet.
It was always interesting that you did have that tremendous success, and yet it stayed as just one album and one tour. And I've read in various places that it was your unhappiness with management and accounting and so forth. Was that the real reason for the short tenure for the group?
Well, I think that in bands like GTR that are a combination of two solo careers, when that happens, you've got the novelty value of people going out and buying the record because they've heard about it, and let's see what this sounds like. So really, you've got that first album to go right to the top, and of course, it did very well indeed. But in order to get it to that point, you know, we had a band on the bankroll for 2 years running, and costs were escalating all the time with that. And you know, when it gets to the point where you're having to give personal guarantees for things, you realize that it's very easy to lose your shirt and your house. So for me, I thought that it provided two functions. It showed that all of the guys from Genesis at that time were being written up in Time magazine, because we all had something either in the top 20 or the top 30 together, all five of us at the same time, and that was a great validation for me of all the ideas that I'd had. It showed that it wasn't a fluke. It showed that Yes wasn't a fluke. It showed that Asia wasn't a fluke. It was extremely gratifying to go through everything that had to be done, you know, with gritted teeth at times and steely determination, because from the very first note, the album was accountable. As I say, you know, Clive Davis did a very fine job on it, but we spent 9 months making the album, and the intention originally was to do an album in 3 months, and we came to realize very early on that the kind of technology that was around, early digital technology, meant that you could do all sorts of things, but you couldn't quite do what you can do these days quite as fast. You can't fix timing and tuning in the way that the computers allow you to do that now. You know, yes, you'd work with offsets, you'd be able to do various things, but we knew that in an era where people were competing with drum machines and absolute precision and all of that, anything that was released had to be absolutely spot on. So it took a lot to get the thing up to the standard that it achieved.
I was just going to say, I know that we're out of time, and there's hundreds of other questions that we could go over, but I really wish you the best of luck with everything, including your upcoming U.S. tour, and thank you so much. It's been an honor to talk to you.
Thank you. Honor talking to you again. Thank you.
Our thanks to Steve Hackett for talking with us. We'll be back soon with another edition of the VVN Music Podcast. Remember that you can get the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues at vvnmusic.com. And for a brand new listening experience with the greatest music of the last 60 years, try out VVN Music Radio. If you have any comments or questions about the website or this podcast, please send them to vvnnetwork@gmail.com. Our theme music is performed by Yahar. This program was recorded on November 14th, 2015, and is a production of the VVN Network, copyright 2015.